Welcome everyone to today's Facebook live stream event. With back to school just around the corner, we have a very timely topic today, helping the child who stutters using distanced learning. Our special guest is Ellen Kelly. She is an associate professor in the Department of Hearing and Speech Sciences at the Vanderbilt University Medical Center, a speech language pathologist at the Vanderbilt Bill Wilkerson Center, director of the Stuttering Foundation program at Vanderbilt, and executive director of Camp Talks, TALKS, Talking and Learning with Kids Who Stutter. And joining us as always is Jane Frazier, president of the Stuttering Foundation. My name is Greg Wilson, and I'm part of the communications team here at the Stuttering Foundation. To all those watching today, we welcome you and hope you enjoy our program. If you have any questions for Dr. Kelly or for Jane, please send them along in the Facebook comments section, and we'll try to answer them during our time today. Let's get right to some questions. Good morning, good afternoon. Ellen, how are you?
Good morning. I'm well, Greg. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Great. Let's start with a very general question. How do you engage children remotely?
You know, that's a great question. And since about mid-March, we've all been doing that in a variety of ways and really ramping up to speed very quickly to engage children in a new way remotely over the internet. And a lot of it is very similar to what we do in the clinic, and that is to make that personal connection between yourself and the child. And so that usually starts with getting to know them. And oftentimes they're in the home environment, so that adds another layer of, well, tell me where you are and what you're doing and what it's been like for you, and just really getting to know them. Usually if I'm seeing someone for the first time and it's for an evaluation, I'll let the parents know to have them come to our meeting with things that they really enjoy, whether they're toys or games or their pets or whatever in the environment. And that way we really just begin to establish that connection. And one of the things I found is that they are much more comfortable in this sort of a forum where you're looking at yourself and looking at them kind of face to face on a TV screen, on a computer monitor, than I was initially. So for me, one of the things that's been helpful is to get more used to that, where the kids, especially, they do face-to-face gaming, they do contact with relatives, etc. like this. They're sometimes more comfortable than I am. So it's making that initial person-to-person contact, getting to know them as a person, what interests them. So you really talk about the person first, and then about communication as a whole, and then about stuttering or whatever their challenges are for communication.
That's a really important point, isn't it, Ellen, that you're seeing them in their home environment. So often in the schools, we want to know how is that home environment comprised? What is it made of? Who's there? And this enables you to see right away, is the dog barking? Is grandmother interrupting to try to help the child? You see a lot more. And so in many ways, it's better therapy in a way, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that's a really important point. One of the things is I'm talking to speech language pathologists in the schools, where one of the worries they have is not having as much direct contact with parents, caregivers, and others as they might like, given their schedules and their setting as well. And now there's this great opportunity to connect. And with the changes in schedules and shorter school days and just different kinds of formats, you have that opportunity. And so I've got parents who are coming in and out of the picture. I've got them tag teaming where they talk with me and then the child and then back and forth, or the child might bring them in for certain things that we're trying to do. And it's just been wonderful to have more engagement with parents and in their own home. And as you said, that's a different environment. It's more natural, and they seem to be more comfortable in some ways because they are in their more familiar setting.
And, quite often you're looking for a topic, and sometimes it's, do you have a family dog? Do you have a cat? And there, the dog's right there in the home with you. And often that opens up a whole line of because sometimes it's difficult to get the child to talk at all. So if you're there in their living room with them via teletherapy, you can just say, oh, tell me more about your dog, or tell me more about the cat that just walked across the screen. So it just opens up a whole nother world.
Yeah, absolutely. And with the little ones, to have their parents just set it up so that they're taking a wide view of the carpet and they have toys and games and whatever intrigues the child there or on the table. And you're getting that initial sample in that parent-child context and listening and getting to know them before you can then make connections based on that content and what you just saw. And then you're also listening to speech and language and watching the interactions and ready to compliment parents on what they're already doing and then build that a little bit more. So it's really been delightful to kind of get into the homes and into more of the kind of personal lives of families in a way that I don't know if they would pick it if they could, but
Yes.
because of the necessities, it's like that.
But I've seen, I've watched many years of footage where the poor parents are feeling so awkward. They're on the floor in a clinic. They've never been there before, and they're trying to pretend that they're really playing with the child in a natural way. It's got to be hard for them sometimes. And usually the children will forget. The minute they see the toys, then they've forgotten. But I think quite often so the nice thing is you're seeing the parents in their own home environment. They're more at ease, and everything about it sounds really good.
Yeah, and even things like recording in the clinic, it seems like the camera there and the microphones are so obtrusive, so obvious. But at home, we're using the technology that's right here on the computer or the iPhone or the iPad. You just hit record and just continue as you were, which is nice.
It's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and you brought up parents and engaging parents. I think some folks that are listening today that are parents might want to know, what can a parent do to support a successful session in a virtual learning session?
Yeah, that's a great question, Greg. And it kind of differs depending on the child and what's going on in therapy and what they're working on and how far we've gotten in them taking ownership of their therapy, of their stuttering, of their communication in general. And with older children, and especially over time, even with some of the younger ones, not the preschoolers, but maybe starting first, second grade, then that's really a discussion between me and the children as we decide, well, how can mom and dad be helpful here? And what's going well and what's not? And I think that a really important step, whether we're back in the schools or when we're back in the schools, right, at some point, or in this kind of a format, is helping the child to really take over as the one in charge of their communication across settings and really helping everybody else understand, advocating for themselves, educating others, and in getting ready for the school year. That's going to be a big part of it. For parents, we naturally tend to worry and we naturally try to make things easier or better for our kids. And sometimes we do that in a way that's not so helpful. So rather than kind of negotiating these new and unknown, uncharted waters with our children and kind of sharing that we don't know everything and we can't make it all smooth, trying to do that and then fretting about anything that might go wrong. And so I really want to encourage parents to kind of embrace this difference. There's nothing we can do about it. What's going on currently as kind of an adventure. It's a challenge in so many ways, but it also gives us an opportunity to be super creative and super personal to what the family's life is like. Everything we do hinges on communication. And communication is about relationship. And while that happens everywhere, and especially in the home. And one of the things I've been really heartened to see during COVID-19 is families kind of spending more time together, sometimes forced, sometimes not so forced, and really trying to let go of the unnecessary things and really focus on being together and taking it a minute at a time, a step at a time. And so thinking about the school year coming up for kids, and we can facilitate that, to really involve their parents in a discussion that includes everything from how I'm feeling about this, what the uncertainties are, what I'm looking forward to, maybe how we can do school differently in a way that fits our family, where those kids who might be at full day school, and there's going to be a whole variety of different ways of approaching this, may be kind of restricted to a classroom environment. If you're at home, or at least home part of the time, you can get up and exercise and get outside and take a walk and do things in the backyard with your family. And all of those things involve communication. We often look back on challenges in our lives, and those are the times when we've grown most. And even though we don't necessarily look forward to them, welcome them, want things to be uncertain or difficult for us, those are the times when we find out what we value most, what is most important to our relationships with our kids, and then how we foster those. I've had a lot of parents come to me during this and say, now that he's home with me, I'm noticing stuttering like I never have before. And they're worried about it. But on some level, what I'm saying with them is, well, you know what? They feel comfortable talking with you and they're with you. And so they're going for it. So of course you're going to hear more of the stuttering. And that's a good thing. And then as the Stuttering Foundation and its materials and all of its educational opportunities stress, focus on the content, the message, because that's ultimately what's most important.
And also, it's be relieved that they are expressing themselves, because you don't want a boiling pot. That it's so much better that, like you say, that they are kind of letting their stuttering out. It helps you in therapy, and in the long run, it will help them. But I think also one point that you've actually made there was normalizing the stuttering. The other thing is being there all day long. So if a child comes in exhausted from school at 4 and you notice that they're stuttering, you don't really know how much it's affecting them during the day. Is it playing a role at school or not? So you're just getting a much more global picture. And I would hope that, that a lot more reading is going on, that board games in the old days when families didn't go anywhere, everybody played board games and really enjoyed them, whether it was Monopoly or Clue or whatever it was, or just card games. And so I think, they're sort of rediscovering things like that. And that's another opportunity for communication in a different way, in a lighthearted way. So lots of, rather than it just being focused on schoolwork and having to give a presentation, communication of things that happen on the Monopoly board, for example, as a difference.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect point. And I have seen families doing more board games and card playing, and even sitting down to meals together at the same time, everybody together.
Wonderful.
And that whole need for turn taking and listening and supporting and empathizing, and everyone feeling a part of the family and an important part of it, with ideas to share and creative gifts and things. And, for families to sit there and just talk and just enjoy each other, and maybe without some of the same time constraints that we had when you've got to commute to work and you've got to take kids to school and get them ready in the morning. I was thinking this morning that as kids are getting ready for back to school, I bet they don't have to buy new clothes.
That's right. That's a big savings.
Save some money on gas, save some money on clothing, and then think about how you want to set up your space in your house, and everybody can contribute to that. So that'd be the kind of back to school, new and exciting thing. How do we set this up so that Dad can work, Mom can work, each of us can have our time, and what will we be doing in between? Let's schedule it. Let's make a plan, and then let's see how it goes. And then we can revisit it at supper time and then make some modifications for the next day. And just
structuring is also something that can be important. I know during the summertime, we used to hear from families where the child's fluency was really, he was having more difficulty in the summer because there wasn't the structure. So I think each family, some people thrive with structure. This is when we have breakfast. This is when we study. This is when we go for outdoors. And others don't so much, but being able to restructure that in a different way and learning what that child's needs are, because when he leaves at 8 and doesn't come back till 4, you don't really know, is that child so tired after lunch, for example, that he needs a rest time, or is his fluency worse in the afternoon because he's tired? It's going to give you all sorts of tips about the child's health that you may not have noticed when he wasn't there all day.
Yes, a number of really important points there. 2 of them, predictability. All of us need some sort of predictability, some sort of structure. And as you said, some people need more of that, but we all need to kind of know what's coming next in different ways. And then structure in the home environment, as families think about how will it work best for us, then you've got flexibility. It's not the same school day, the same order of events, etc., as might happen in a formal school setting.
And that's a learning experience too, because everyone has to think. You're not just regimented, but you've got to think about how you're going to do it rather than boom, boom, boom.
Right. Right. And I've seen kids who are reaching out to other family members and they're connecting and they're playing games over the internet. There's one little guy I'm working with, a 6-year-old, loves to interact with his grandmother, can't do that in person. And the 2 of them are getting on the iPad and having this wonderfully creative game with all these characters they've made up. And it's just a conversation, but with all these layers of storytelling. And he just loves it. And he just is very much himself. And they do that about an hour every day.
Oh, that's wonderful. A new scheduling for him.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
for her.
Yeah. And then some, as you've talked about in some of your interviews, all the different stories that are available that include characters who stutter, talk about stuttering, teach about stuttering. And families can read those together and then talk about it. And what a great way to open a door to a discussion about, is this like you or is this different? And how can I be supportive of you? I had a family of a teenager who watched the King's speech together this summer, popped some popcorn and watched it. And it opened this entire discussion of, is that what it's like for you? And are we responding to you in the same way as that mother or father or brother did? And do those things help you? And it just, for the first time with this family of a teenager, they were talking about stuttering, never had before.
Opens a lot of doors.
Let me give a shout out to all the people that are watching here. I'm seeing people signing in from India, Argentina, and Zambia. So Jane, we're going all around the world today.
Wonderful.
I have a question from Mike in Zambia, who says, this is awesome, watching from Zambia. What can a parent do to help a child who stammers when they are home in rural places without access to the internet?
Yeah, and that is a significant concern or problem, or just lack of availability, depending on where you are and where you live and what the connections are like. And a lot of schools are trying to set up all sorts of learning and set up hubs and things and trying to be creative about connecting kids. But there will be children who are in places where the internet is not going to be accessible. Well, in some ways we think about, okay, so when the power's down, when the internet's down, and we know that even in our modern technology, it cuts out or we freeze and we have to wait for it to boot back up again. So there are interruptions. It's not always smooth. And isn't that just like life? So Mike, in a rural area where a child doesn't have access to the internet, we're always thinking about, what are your communication opportunities? Who do you talk with? What do you talk about? Where does communication take place? Are you communicating? Are you sharing? Are you relating? Are you being who you are? And then where does stuttering fit into that? Do you need to talk to other people about it? Would that be helpful? Do you need to disclose? Are you hiding it? And how is that affecting your communication? And to have others in the environment parents, siblings, grandparents, neighbors, others in the community who you can talk to, because every conversation is an opportunity to focus on getting your message out there and really relating to other people. And then parents can be helpful. Obviously, speech therapists can be helpful in exploring what's getting in the way. Are you choosing not to talk when you have something to say? And if so, what are the thoughts going through your head? What are the emotions? What would you like to do or just do a little bit more of? So I think it's always looking at the fundamentals. Whatever life gives us, if we're not in isolation, complete isolation, then who are those people that are around us who we can connect with? I've been really heartened to see how much volunteerism has come along with this, how much reaching out to elderly people who are by themselves and are not going out because of health risks, etc., and having these young kids make them cards and care packages or talk with them over on the phone or in other ways to just really connect. And as long as we're connecting and communicating, then you've got an opportunity to work on goals for stuttering, for communicating, for just really relating to others.
Well, I'd like to add, if you're in Zambia, we do have at least one book, Sometimes I Just Stutter, that has been translated into Swahili. And if you have a way to reach out to us, to give us your address, we'd be happy to mail you a copy. Or if there is somewhere near you a library or a church that has an internet connection, you can actually download that book in Swahili. And it's just a charming book for children ages 7 to 12, talks about stuttering, talks about how to talk about stuttering with your parents, with your teachers. So that's a wonderful opportunity to reach out and read the book with the child and go over the various chapters and good explanation on why we stutter, what makes us stutter, and things that you can do. So again, we have materials translated into many other languages, but one of them is Swahili, and so hopefully that would be helpful not only to you who are watching today, but also to any other children in Zambia and other countries surrounding that.
We have people tuning in from Peru and from Dallas, Texas, saying hello to everyone. So hello to you. And again, we're happy to take questions on our Facebook page. One question I think that gets answered or asked quite often is, how do you tackle shyness and hesitancy in a remote learning environment?
Yeah, and that's just natural for some of the people that we work with, maybe natural for some of us as well. And so it's the same way you would handle it clinically. It's just a different kind of a format. And you help people to open in their own time and in their own way. So you have clients who are right there talking to you from the get-go, no hesitancy. And then you have others who just really need some time to get the whole lay of the land and see what you're like and what this format is like and how that's going to go for them. And in a way that's kind of wise. It's saying, before I jump in and trust you and talk with you and tell you what's going on with me, I want to know what you're about and what we're doing here and all of that. And so again, you tend to start with those things that are separate from talking specifically about stuttering or communication, but those things that are of interest to the child. And parents and caregivers and teachers and others can be very helpful in letting us know this child is really motivated by, or this child's gifts are like this. We often use things like drawing, and in this format, you can use a whiteboard, or there are lots of free available internet-based things that you can use to draw cartoons or illustrations or pick pictures or put things together. You can use, I tend to do things like, as we're brainstorming about things, create word clouds and then talk about those word clouds and what the prominent thought or emotion or feeling was. And those things are a little bit later in time. So initially it's just about being there and learning about them. And you tend to ask fewer questions and make more statements, observations about what they brought with them to show you, or what they talked about with their parent if you watch some of that sample, and just let them open as they would in person. And in person, I would parallel play with them and then comment on things, even play on my own a little bit next to them and let that open up. And you can do the same thing online by maybe both of you kind of creating in a corner of the whiteboard something and then sharing it, or building something together and seeing and just sharing ideas and going back and forth as you construct this scene. And so just to allow them to begin to enter in their own time and in their own way.
I'm thinking about the magic words, I wonder.
Yes.
I wonder what you brought with you today. I wonder who your favorite animal is. Because that's not really asking, what's your favorite animal? That's really saying, I wonder. And also, if you say it in such a way that, I wonder what your favorite animal is. And then if they're still hesitating, then you can begin talking about what yours is and why. And whether you feel them warm up or not, then you proceed. But I call I wonder the magic words, because they are magic, and they remove all time pressure from the child. It's just, I wonder. And it's out there just kind of sitting there, floating. And this works as well with adults, by the way, but it's magic words.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, I originally learned that from our friends at the Michael Palin Center, and watched, I think, Willie Botterill in particular do that in some clips and in some interactions, and also with adults, as you've said.
Exactly.
We find it in our meetings, sometimes our team meetings, we're all sort of using well, I wonder what, because it's a way of inquiring or querying without putting pressure on the person that you have to provide a response. Because I can wonder all day and you can decide to say something about it or ignore it.
Yeah, it's a wonderful way. In every situation that you're in, I wonder. So.
Another question. Obviously, we're about to head back to school, and some teachers are now going to have students who stutter that they'll be responsible for teaching remotely. Do you have any tips for teachers that now have a student that stutters in class? And tips for parents on how to engage teachers that will now be teaching their child who stutters?
Yeah, that's really important regardless of the way the school year looks. And whenever we can be preemptive and kind of set the tone, set what we want to happen, educate people, help them understand what stuttering means and what it means for this child. And so you usually start by talking with the child and the family and saying, well, how do we let your teacher know? What do you know about your teacher? What does your teacher know about stuttering? Should we write a letter? Should we send an email? Do you want to meet with them maybe ahead of time on Zoom and have a little conversation about it? Share some materials from the Stuttering Foundation specifically geared toward teachers. Answer questions. Let the teacher know when to call on you and when to kind of let you be. During our online summer camp last week, we used those little thumbs up and other kinds of visual cues for kids to let us know when they had something to say. And we used claps for them to be able to acknowledge what somebody else said without having to speak. And I noticed that over the course of the week, everyone seemed to become more and more comfortable with waiting and allowing silence before jumping in. So for teachers to also set up some rules where everybody gets a turn, and then talk to the child who stutters about, hey, should we educate the class about this? Is this something that you could teach your classmates about, or I could help you share? And then let them know what the challenges are, if that's what you want to share, or what you want them to do or not do as they listen. And most of the time, it's what we want for all kids, all humans, right? Listen, fully listen, wait, apologize if you butt in, and focus on that content, that message, and that's what you're going to reinforce or follow up on. And then give kids lots of different creative outlets to express themselves that aren't just about talking. And those things can be done in this sort of Zoom framework as well, and things that are of interest to kids as they're developing presentations and things. So really getting to know the individual child, what's helpful for them, having more information about what stuttering is, which is readily available from the Stuttering Foundation, and making that connection. And as you said, parents can be a part of that and really facilitate that, get to know the teacher, find out what they know, if they've ever had other kids in their class who stutter in the past and how they've responded, see what questions they have. As speech therapists, we are very happy to be able to help negotiate that and share information and talk with teachers and make suggestions and help to bridge that gap as well.
So in some ways, what you're saying is it's almost easier to reach the teachers now than before, because before we had to drive to the school and hope that she had time. But now with the Zoom sessions, perhaps it's easier. And of course, I was just laughing thinking about the Zoom function of raising your hand, because you when you're in a session with 15 people, of course, you have to hit the raise your hand at the bottom to be able to speak. So in some ways, it does your training for you. Is that right, Ellen? The Zoom itself is a trainer of taking turns.
Right. It allows that visual cue. Now, sometimes as you're scanning, I feel like I'm old enough to remember the Brady Bunch in Hollywood Squares where you had all these little people on your television screen. And it feels like that. And you're scanning, all right, who raised their hand? Who wants a turn? But that also slows you down. And,
absolutely.
TV and radio, silence seems eternal. And yet, as we've gotten more and more used to Zoom, you need to allow that silence to see who's next. And, it sort of gives you a break, and it gives the child who stutters a break as well. So not as much time urgency, I think.
Cynthia asks, with the use of the internet and communication through the screens, do you think eye contact is affecting or will affect in some way people who stutter when they go back to face-to-face communication?
Well, that's an interesting question. I'm not sure how it will affect the return to that. I was reading an article online as schools are getting ready to go back, and there are many different formats being tried in different ways to help connect kids back to the school environment. And I was reading a blog by a special education teacher who has quite a number of children in her classroom that have autism and developmental disorders. And obviously with those with autism, social contact, eye contact, etc., can be much more difficult and avoided in face-to-face contact. And she was noticing that when they're on Zoom, when they're looking at their TV screen, they're actually looking right at the other children as the other children talk, and right at her as she is talking. Now, it's different and it's technology, and so it might make it easier. What if we start to complement that and say, wow, you are really looking right at me as I'm answering your question, as you're asking your question, etc. So to reinforce that, eye contact is an interesting thing. Let's put autism aside for a moment, that people do that differently, and it actually relates a lot to their own personality. So there are people who like to look right at you and keep looking at you. And then a lot of people who check in and then kind of look away when they're thinking or when they're talking, especially if it's something more complex, and come back. Sometimes when you're really trying to use good eye contact, it becomes more artificial. And so really relying on that sort of natural exchange. And I think we can still do the same sorts of things with children. And that is to orient them to us when we do want them to check in and look at us. So, please look at me when I ask you something so I know that you're understanding the question. And then we can even ask for them to repeat it back. So I think we want that to be as natural as possible and encourage it. And I think once we're back face to face, I think people are going to really enjoy and even crave it. I have found that when I'm out and about and I'm wearing a mask and other people are wearing a mask, I am so much more focused on the eyes. I'm looking to see, is the person smiling? And I can see that in the eyes. Are they understanding? Looking at the eyebrows. And so there's so much communication there, which I think we're actually focusing on a bit more, being masked and things like that. So I think I'm feel optimistic about how that will go once we get to be face to face again.
Well, and that's, you answered, I believe, a question from Shiraz, who said that some people who stutter have shared their experience that by wearing a face mask, they've noticed their fluency levels have increased. So I think you're hitting on that exact point.
Yeah, and interestingly, like all things stuttering, right, Jane? For some people, they're stuttering more. For other people, they're stuttering less. And that might have to do with their own perceptions of what they might be showing on their face, what other people might be seeing, and how they interpret that. And so then I'm wearing a mask and that sort of changes things up. And I'm able to be more fluent because you're not seeing my mouth. For somebody else, oh my gosh, you're covering my mouth. You're taking away those social cues, etc. This is not comfortable. It's harder for me. So I think we're going to get all of the above.
Yeah, and if, for example, if you have tremors or something, and you become embarrassed about people seeing them, and the mask hides them. But this kind of sounds like it's in a class with using a foreign language too. There's something quite different that's happened. It's a distraction, and with many distractions with stuttering, you may experience some temporary fluency. I don't like to say that it may go away, but it may go away, and that's, of course, the really disappointing thing about stuttering is just when you think that things, you're really fluent, and if that's all you're wanting and you're not focused on communication rather than just the moment of fluency, then you're going to be disappointed eventually, and you need to think about how you're going to deal with that. If indeed you take the mask off, for example, and you find that you're stuttering more, how are you going to handle that and be ready to handle that effectively?
And I think that relates really nicely to our saying that what stuttering becomes over time are all the things we try to do to postpone it, avoid it, stop it, keep it from happening, or push it forward. And those are all kind of tricks or avoidances that tend to work at least temporarily, but then they get in the way, or they get layered on each other, and they interfere with communication. And then what you have to do is kind of dial those back, start to get rid of those. And most people who stutter, certainly adults, teens, school-age kids, they have an idea of what those tricks or postponements or avoidances are that they're using that may no longer be effective, but might still be there. And then discussing those, addressing those, and then working to eliminate those so the focus is on communication. And ironically, as you do that, you tend to become more fluent because you're not trying so hard not to stutter and building up more attention.
And the little book that I was talking about in Swahili, which of course is in English as well, talks about that, really focuses on that for children. When you stop trying so hard, you're going to stutter less. It's just a paradox, but it's a good paradox.
Absolutely.
Well, that's been a terribly informative session. We've spent about 40 minutes now. If you have any final thoughts for everyone as we wrap up today, I think for some, school has already started. For people around the world, maybe it never stopped. But most here in the US will be heading back in the next couple of weeks. What should folks be focusing on over the next couple of weeks as they prepare to go back to school?
I think what I would encourage is not to think too far ahead or too globally, because that can be completely overwhelming. But instead, think about what's coming up and really brainstorm about what I'm looking forward to, what I'm nervous or worried about, and then how can we approach that creatively? And then each day to think about the next day and to plan it out, to get excited about it. And then at the end of the day, to talk it through and make some adjustments. and for parents to kind of give themselves a break and say, you know what, I don't have to have all the answers. I can tell my child that, wow, this is all crazy. We don't know what's going to happen next, but we can talk about what we can do here and now and together, and what our next day is going to be like. And then if something doesn't go the way we hoped, we'll tweak it and go in with that kind of openness to it, but also acknowledging that it's not easy. There's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of fear, and you can't suppress that. You need to talk about it and put it in perspective. And then that giant cloud gets smaller, and you can hold those worries and those fears and those anxieties lightly and really focus on, well, what are the things that we can do now and do together? And how can we communicate those together? I think those are the things that I would suggest that people really just kind of try to stay in the moment.
Staying in the
Wonderful.
moment is always good advice, Ellen. But also, since we are at that time of year, of course, I want to recommend that people visit our website at stutteringhelp.org for materials, classroom presentation, which could be adapted to Zoom if that's the way your local school is going. Lots of information for teachers, tips for parents. So visit it today and let us know what you think and give us your feedback. We wonder and hope that you will enjoy everything, but we count on your feedback to let us know what you think. So we appreciate you joining us today, for sure.
Today's Facebook Live conversation will be available as a video on our Facebook page, so people can continue to comment there and can share this freely with other people, and we would welcome that. That concludes our session for today. Thank you everyone for joining us.